Okay. Hello, welcome to Atheist Church. Today coming at you from the Crest Theater. Thanks to them for letting us film here. And I have a special guest today, Professor Matt McCormick from Sacramento State University. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm good.
Good, and you are a professor of philosophy over at Sac State.
Yep.
Cool. So Matt has a presentation called The Case Against Christ. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that presentation?
Well, I've adopted the unenviable task and impossible task of taking on Jesus. So far, the battle's going very well, I must tell you. I won't be trying to be funny, though. You're the comedian. I've gotten interested in the question of what are the historical grounds or background evidence and information that might give somebody good, substantial reasons to believe that Jesus was really a divine character. So I'm taking some of my philosophy skills and something we do called epistemology and critical thinking and trying to sort of do some very careful thinking about what might make it reasonable to believe this. And of course, the conclusion I'm coming up with is that it's not. I can't see that it is. And I'm doing my best to try to explain the reasons as I see them for why it's not reasonable.
And you've made it very accessible. If anyone's listening and thinking that it's going to be full of multisyllabic words that have them lost, it is. But then you break it down,
I'm trying,
and it's even funny and entertaining.
Yeah. I got a lot of grief for using the word epistemology too much on my blog the other day. And I said, hey, look, if you want to take this stuff seriously, you're going to have to get the dictionary out. Just deal with it.
I've had several people in my comment sections get on my case for using, quote, fancy words.
Yeah, $3 words, I think is what you called
it. I saw you do your presentation at the Free Thinkers, Atheists, and Other Non-Believers.
Right.
These groups have such long names.
They do.
There was one analogy that I really liked in there where you talked about believing in Christianity compared to the Salem witch trials and believing that they were actual witches.
Right. Well, I'll see if I can keep it short. Surprisingly, I think it's kind of difficult to pin down what it is for somebody to be irrational or unreasonable, having dedicated most of my career to just that question. And one of the places I think where it comes out with people, and we're all guilty of this, right? This is not just the folks who believe in Jesus, is by invoking or using these double standards of judgment and criticism and skepticism in our lives. So when we hear about something we're favorable to, we sort of drop our critical scrutiny and accept it readily. And then when we hear something, the political analogy here is very good. When you hear something you dislike, some conclusion you don't like, or some point that you disagree with, you get out the scalpels and you're highly critical and you apply all this special scrutiny. So long story short, what I think is going on by and large with the Jesus case is that for a whole bunch of reasons people are very receptive and very congenial to and favorable to the Jesus story, and we're immersed in it, we hear it all the time, we're familiar with it, we're very comfortable with it, and there's a lot of social stigma on raising hard questions about it. But in fact, I think lots and lots of people who do believe in Jesus are already using perfectly normal smart principles of reasoning and evidence and critical scrutiny in other places in their lives that would, if they applied it across the board, would lead them to reject the Jesus story, with barely consideration. So you get this kind of double standard going on, where, if you present them with claims from some other religion, or present them with some claims, about the evidence for global warming, or the evidence about, who was responsible for 9/11, the global warming case is a very good one, right? Because lots and lots of people are skeptical about, particularly Christians are skeptical about global warming. So they'll apply remarkably astute and careful critical scrutiny to the case for global warming, but then when it comes to the Jesus case, just throw open the doors and just let the sketchiest, thinnest thread of evidence come through. So getting back to your question, the Salem witch trials example is a case where I'm trying to find an analogy that'll bring out the cognitive dissonance and make people try to get people to see the the double standard going on. So in a nutshell, here's how it goes. When you start looking, and you don't want to go into this whole huge background, but when you start looking at the historical evidence about surrounding, and let's just focus on the resurrection of Jesus, right? Okay. The magical divine event, right? The one that Christianity arguably is built on. You start looking at really what we've got there. What we got is a few stories out of the Gospels and the Bible, and maybe some indirect, secondary, third-hand corroboration from some other historical sources. And then you get this huge church tradition for 2,000 years that's built on it. So you look and you've come to find out, that the Gospels were written 30 and 40 and 60 and 90 years after the alleged events. And they're based on hearsay stories that the authors of the Gospels were getting from people they talked to who maybe saw it, or maybe they talked to some other people who talked to some other people who talked to some other people who they claim that they saw the resurrection. So you get these written down decades later. And then, in fact, we don't even have those records. We've got copies of those original written documents from 250 or 200 years later.
And not Xerox copies or mimeographs. This is
right, exactly. Well, much worse. I mean, take the crappiest Xerox machine and just imagine, what it's like to have the thing repeated over and over and over and over again. And that's a very good example, right? Because that brings out the fidelity question about what we're wondering about the transmission of information across time and across people from, the alleged event of Jesus to you.
Right.
Okay, so, and I've got lots and lots more to say about this, and Keith, maybe direct you to my blog. I've got lots of stuff written on it. But I think there's now lots of evangelical Christians will disagree with me, but I think that I can make a good case that the sum total, the evidence in favor of the Jesus resurrection is pretty sketchy. But here's the bigger point. Take the Salem witch trials. So here in the late 1600s, we get a big group of people in Salem, Massachusetts, who get themselves all worked up. They get the town officials, we get husbands and wives, and we get the governor of Massachusetts involved, and we get a court set up, and we get this huge tribunal set up that then prosecutes and pursues an investigation into alleged witchcraft being performed by these women. And in the end, they convict and execute, I think, 19 of them. And hundreds more get accused and convicted and punished for various other things. So, what do you know about the Salem witch trials? Well, what we've got jointly is we've got what amounts to a truckload of original historical documented evidence. We've got the sworn affidavits of all the people who were involved. We've got husbands testifying against wives and kids testifying against their parents. And we've got exhaustive court documents and careful investigations, and this enormous investigation was conducted by a bunch of smart people, well-educated for the time, and very carefully done. And by and large, we've got most of that actual evidence, right? So we've got what amounts to an enormous body of evidence about that event. So I got to ask, wondering about this question, right? Ask this question. Okay, so if we were to take this whole historical case for Jesus thing seriously, what if we applied similar sort of reasoning to the Salem witch trials case? So by analogy, you could say that truckload of evidence about the Salem witches amounts to a huge body of evidence in favor of the conclusion that those women were actually witches. Right? I mean, look, if you're going to say that the gospel evidence for Jesus supports the conclusion that he magically came back from the dead, then what's disanalogous here about saying, well, the Salem witch trial evidence is a powerful indicator that these women were actually witches, not just like sleight of hand magicians, but that they were really doing, tapping into some otherworldly source or actually doing some supernatural stuff.
You've got more witnesses,
right?
Witnesses across a wider range of education.
Right.
Many of these people having an education that would not be available,
right,
even to the Emperor of Rome.